The Resident Evil 3 Remake is a game with mixed reception to say the least. While it is a very enjoyable game, it did leave out a ton of content from the original Resident Evil 3, which left many diehard fans with a bitter taste. With that being said, here's all the cut content from the Resident Evil 3 Remake. So there was a bunch of files that never made it into the final product. This includes anti-beta protocols, anti-gamma protocols, Bobby's journal, Carmania note, the current status of stars, Moon's donut notice, notice of construction, and the pharmacy notice. Nemesis had quite a few design changes throughout development. These concepts here show Nemesis suited in different costumes, and some even had him equipped with a minigun. Shown here is a few early concepts for the Hunter Y and the Hunter B. In the original Resident Evil 3, the clock tower was a fairly important place. This is where Jill solves several puzzles, fights Nemesis, and Carlos too has several things to do while Jill recovers inside the chapel within this building. Ultimately, Capcom decided to cut the clock tower sequence almost entirely and only makes an appearance for a boss fight. This left many fans filled with disappointment as this was a big part of the game. So the ending we got in the Resident Evil 3 Remake was quite different from the original. Whereas the original game ends in Jill needing to work her way out of the factory to reach a helicopter before the city is destroyed, the remake scraps that idea and repeats many of the themes and general designs of the lab at the end of the Resident Evil 2 Remake. In this concept art, we can see the origins of Nemesis and how he was created, and there's also some art showing how terribly wrong this experiment on Nemesis went. It is very likely that Capcom did have plans to include this in the game, in the form of a cutscene. In the original game, we had the mine thrower, and in the remake it was scrapped and replaced with the grenade launcher. This was one of the few that made sense to be cut, as it really didn't have much use in the original. Depending on which platform one used, the original game had 8 costumes, some of them serious, others silly, and one from Dino Crisis. Unfortunately, these costumes never made it into the remake, and instead we only got 2 costumes, being the STARS uniform and Jill's classic uniform. Crafting ammunition was a new feature in the original Resident Evil 3 and gave players a great sense of control with regards to how they wanted to play. Enhanced ammunition is simply handgun bullets or shotgun shells that are far more powerful than their normal variants. After making the same type of ammunition 7 times in a row, players would have the option of crafting regular or enhanced ammunition, and it made each playthrough unique if someone wanted to specialize in only one weapon. For some reason, this entire concept was ignored in the Resident Evil 3 Remake, which really doesn't make any sense considering that it was in Resident Evil 7. Shown here is concept art of Jill's apartment. After inspection, it seems that Capcom did have plans for Jill to explore her apartment and uncover some chilling scenes like the one shown in this concept art. The original game featured several points where the player would be faced with a sudden decision to make. An example of this is Nemesis arriving without warning and Jill needing to decide to stay and fight or run for safety, forcing her way to find key items in other locations. The premise was interesting but ultimately made no real difference in terms of player progression. This was something that we never got to see in the remake, which if added could have given the game more replayability. In the clock tower sequence of Resident Evil 3, there were giant spider enemies. Since the clock tower sequence never made it in the game, we never got to see the giant spider enemies. However, we still did get to see a similar spider enemy called Drain Diamos in the remake. The blue herb was an item that cured poison in the original game. In the remake, if you were to get poison, you would instead use a green herb which would cause Jill to puke up bugs, thus curing the poison. Bracken Park was yet another big location from the original that never made it into the remake. An enemy exclusively at the park was the Gravedigger, which was a boss encounter. The fan favorite Mercenaries game mode was in the original game and could be obtained after beating the game. This was most likely scrapped and replaced with Resident Evil Resistance. In the original game, a fan favorite character, Barry Burton, did make an appearance by rescuing Jill and Carlos with a chopper. There was no such appearance in the remake. The original Resident Evil 3 had a small reward for diligent players, a compilation of epilogues that would detail what happened to the other characters that survived the destruction of Raccoon City, even foreshadowing the events of Resident Evil Code Veronica and Resident Evil 4 with Chris, Claire, and Leon's epilogues. The main problem was that players would have to replay the game at least 8 times to receive all of them. Early designs for the altered Nemesis were quite different from what we ultimately got. Shown here, it seems that Capcom had plans for the altered form to be more aquatic. Zombie crows was another enemy type that never made it into the game. They were larger and more aggressive than regular crows and will sit patiently unless they consider you a threat. And there you have it, that is all the cut content from the Resident Evil 3 Remake. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.